I want to make the case explicitly against voting as the strongest strategy that the left currently has available. Now, because my usual...
Okay, nobody said it's the strongest strategy. Well, with the Western left in the state it currently is, you know, who knows? For me, voting has always been about, like, lesser evilism gets a bad rap, but I guess if the opposite would be more evilism, you know, you get one or the other. It's about creating an environment that allows you to continue your work, basically. Fascist governments tend to make it extremely difficult for leftists to do any kind of outreach or organizing. Liberal governments are, well, they're not great, but they're a hell of a lot better, you know, so... definitely an improvement there.
What's special about this is that not voting is a fundamentally illogical, nonsensical position, yet despite this, people are being drawn to it anyway. This is because
well, not everyone can be as cool and smart as your average Vaush viewer, so it is to be expected.
A political landscape such as ours, still mired in capitalist realism, where alternatives can scarcely be imagined, let alone be made feasible, resistance can often manifest as a desire to reject society altogether. In a sense, the only response to a world in which revolution or even reform feel hopelessly out of grasp is to simply declare, I cannot imagine a new future, but I don't need one to reject the present existence anyway.
I don't think this is a very sound argument. First of all, people withholding their vote or refraining from participating in modern society in one form or another doesn't seem to really, like, change society. America has a relatively low voter turnout percentage. Like, people are pretty disengaged here in this country, and we're also the world superpower. I don't think that necessarily indicates a shift towards, you know, social rejection. I think that actually, in a lot of ways, you'll find that the people who are most likely to change society are the ones who are most involved in it. People who are, like, hopelessly, desperately involved in the process, who are familiar with its intricacies and how to work through it, people who stay involved in spite of the seeming hopelessness of it all, you know? It's not as though the society we're living in today is the most unjust one that has ever been seen. Quite the contrary. I think that through most of human history, the power systems that people lived under were probably more unjust and more nonsensical than the ones we live under today. Things are more perceptible today. As imperceptible as they seem, you know, we're up against, like, a low bar. Things, you know, things could be worse in that respect, at least. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that, like, rejecting the system out of disgust necessarily produces better outcomes.
Because in rejecting these systems, we also reject their rules, their internal logic, and their entire framework of what makes sense. While those who subscribe to the logic of existing superstructures, our political systems and the electoral process, will insist on how simple and obvious just voting is, that can't change the fact that the desire not to vote is a seed by which a radical desire to change society can grow.
I disagree. I think for the most part, people who don't vote seem to be driven more by apathy or complacency or ignorance than anything else. It's not as though the average person who doesn't vote is also an extremely engaged organizer or whatever. I think they just get burnout and they get apathetic. That, by the way, is what explains people not voting. It's not like a principled disgust with or rejection of the system, because if they felt that way, none of them would eat meat or dairy products, which they do, and they wouldn't buy shit at their local, you know, big box store, which they do, global capitalism. And in reality, I think it's more apathy, it's burnout. You know, they care a lot. A lot of them got involved back when Bernie Sanders got involved in politics on a national level, and he, you know, through 2016 and onward, or 2015, I guess, and, you know, they feel pretty hopeless right now. And as a consequence of that, you know, it feels like they can't emotionally bear the weight. Look at me. I am a pretty, you know, I'm a big brain logical guy, and even I don't really want to argue in favor of voting for Joe Biden right now, even though it is, as far as I'm concerned, the empirically correct moral choice. It's distasteful, you know, it doesn't feel very good. But these aren't really, like, moral arguments. They're just well, distaste. They're emotional. You know, it's not fun or nice or happy. None of it is, but if you're given a choice between two outcomes and one is worse.
Of course, in reality, no longer allowing ourselves to be tied up in the spectacle of electoral politics frees us up to do all sorts of things, but...
No, you're not tied up in the spectacle. It's just a vote. It doesn't free you. It's not an if and, or, you know, it's not mutually exclusive. It takes a portion of one day every 2 years. It doesn't keep you from doing other stuff.
The line of electoral leftists today is to play our society's superstructures, to correct these raw desires to escape the present moment back into current society, into lesser evilism.
Man, I feel like I'm running out of stuff to say here because unfortunately Zekzizi, who is a smart person, mind, is waffling. This is waffling. This is revolutionary pseudo-speak. It's duck speak. It doesn't mean anything. The constant gesturing towards, you know, direct action, the party politic, the superstructure. Look, two people can win the election. One is better than the other. The better person winning over the worse person doesn't detract from your ability to do other things. No amount of magic words takes away from that. I think there are broader arguments that can be made towards the idea that, like, any kind of engagement at all has a necessary and unavoidable, even if it's not innate, a nonetheless unavoidable sort of dampening effect and revolutionary potential. That was the subject of the conversation that I had with Zoe Baker years ago on this channel. I disagree. Or perhaps I think that it is a worthwhile sacrifice if you're up against a candidate like Trump, who would be far worse than Biden for any kind of left organizing, you know. So I think that there's some consideration to be had there. But anything past that is just a pure accelerationist argument. And at that point, you would have to make the case to me how in the world you think electoral non-participation of a small group of very online leftists, not even 1% of the population, would have any meaningful effect on anything.
Biden was voted in as a safe, middle-of-the-road establishment candidate just to get Trump out, and now a single term later is running the risk of losing to Trump again.
This is completely true.
Consider as well that the whole time Biden has been in, Republican states such as Florida have only spiraled further into quasi-fascism at a seemingly faster rate than ever. Pushing all weight behind Biden again does not make Trump and the far right go away. Rather, it allows them to fester for another term and then come back the next election cycle even stronger.
I don't know if it would necessarily... Well, in Trump's case specifically, actually, he could very well be dead in 4 years, and the current Republican political movement is built entirely on Trump. So it's actually very possible that Biden getting another 4 years, even if they're dragging his corpse along the White House past the first one, would... Well, it wouldn't fix the problem, but it would... you know, at the very least, just sort of wait out the Trump issue. So that is, in this case, it's actually possible because the Republican Party has done a very poor job of presenting any alternative to Trump as like a viable continuation of his particular brand of populism. So maybe in that case, you know, you run the clock out on him. You run the clock out on both of them. But even then, I'll take 4 years of stalling. Even if that doesn't happen, I'll take 4 years.
And so, if you remain tied to lesser evil voting out of a belief that anything else is simply impossible, it is your duty to be rushing to make it possible when the material conditions provide an opportunity like the one presented to us right now.
See, I don't know what else is possible. Like, I don't know what direct action means. There's always, like, greater evil voting, I guess.
All that's being done instead is propping up a liberalism which fascism feeds off of, and so eventually they will win if this is all we can do. If it's not over Gaza today, it'll be over something else tomorrow.
But if you acknowledge then that Trump winning would just be them winning today, I don't really know what you're... Like, you're not going to be able to get much leftist organizing done under fascism, I would say. Then you better figure it out before fascism wins. Yeah, it's easy, but you can't say that because you're the one being indifferent to Trump winning, right? Like, you can't say... Like, it's easy. If Donald Trump wins, like, as a... Let's imagine for a moment a fantasy world in which the lefties, you know, their non-voting has the impact needed. Donald Trump wins. If Donald Trump then wins, what organizing could be done? What direct action could be done between now and Inauguration Day that would not then immediately be undone by Donald Trump in his victory? Like what? Because you're saying like we're running out the clock. I agree, but I want to make the clock much longer. You know, you're describing a situation in which you're indifferent to the clock being made shorter, you know?
And when they inevitably do win, don't you think it would be important to have a pre-existing group of radicals that are able to actually kick into action and help those who are going to suffer the most?
Like what, like again, what do we mean by this? Like mutual aid, bathtub estrogen? I don't know what this means. You know, I don't know what you think you can do on this level.
Even from an electoralist perspective, there's value in rejecting voting today for the sake of pushing people left, to increase the possibility in the future of a left populist candidate becoming viable who could actually maintain a victory over the far right. These candidates don't just materialize out of thin air after you've waited long enough. They grow out of the pre-existing political landscape. And they're far more likely to gain traction under one full of people so radical they wouldn't even entertain the notion of voting for a genocide enabler.
I disagree massively. I think that it's actually the opposite. I think that leftists indicating that they're unwilling to participate in the electoral system actually makes it less likely. Like, think about it. The viability of a candidate of any given ideology is probably going to increase the more electorally participatory that ideology's adherents are. You know, the more present and active they are, the louder they are, the more likely people are to cater to their interests. You know, politicians don't give a fuck about you if you don't vote. Their job is to get voted in. If you're not voting for politicians, why the fuck should they represent you? Like, why, from their perspective, like, why would they care? You know, they need to be like a powerful voting bloc. Of course, if the lefties are going to end up voting for the Democrat anyway, you know, why would they even care if they're so undiscerning? And the answer to that is, of course, the primary process, unsatisfying and slow as it might be. We got pretty close with Bernie twice. I don't know. Bernie's kind of a lightning bolt in the bottle, though. I don't know if there's anyone else who's got his his W-Riz. Any other Sigma Rizzlers looking to raise the phantom tax on billionaires?
So that's my pitch to not vote in 2024.
It's lovely. That was nice. Yeah, I don't mind go over stuff like this. I know that my answers on these questions are probably going to be frustratingly consistent to Zexizi and other people who disagree with me on this. It's just, yeah, I don't know. Is this a problem mandatory voting could solve? God, I wish we had mandatory voting.